Welcome back, geographers, to part two. Sorry, part one cut off really abruptly there. I'll try to pay more attention as the end is coming in part two here and give us a little bit of a signal there. We're going to pick up right where we left off with natural resources in North Asia. You'll find that on slide 12. We should all be on slide 12. So one of Russia's biggest natural resources are forests and timber, so wood. Russia has 1/5 or 20% of the world's timber. They also have an abundance of fossil fuels. And I know we just talked about Siberia being this kind of empty and harsh area, but they have a ton of fossil fuels up there, specifically oil reserves. So even though we don't see a lot of people living here, this is still a really significant area for Russia because of the oil reserves that they find up there. They also have natural gas reserves in the Arctic, and because of its proximity here, Russia does have control over a lot of these areas here in the Arctic, which means that Russia is the world's largest producer of natural gas. And we're going to end our talk about this region with a couple of cultural spotlights. All right, just a couple of really cool things about this region that I wanted to talk about. The first is the Red Square in Moscow. So the Red Square is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization. And so what they do is they protect or they give protection to certain areas that have some sort of cultural, historical, scientific, whatever significance, universal significance, all right? And they protect those sites for future generations. So one of those UNESCO World Heritage Sites is the Red Square. Pictured here is St. Basil the Blessed, which is in the Red Square. The Red Square, however, is also home to the Kremlin, which is the center of Russia's government. Here on the right, we have the Baikonur Cosmodrome. It's the world's first and largest spaceport, so we might think of it as like a launch site. Built in Kazakhstan, which is not Russia. However, it was part of the Soviet Union. So Russia actually still maintains this site in Kazakhstan. This is where they launched Sputnik 1, which was the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. And this is where they launch to maintain the International Space Center. So I thought that was really cool. We're going to go ahead and jump into West Asia. So we're going to travel here. Remember, we were just talking about North Asia up here. We're going down to the southwest, and this region we would consider to be West Asia. West Asia is generally referred to, though, as the Middle East, commonly, generally. And so when we talk about the Middle East, we're actually also talking about some countries in Africa as well, including Egypt, right? Egypt is culturally part of the Middle East, even though it's not in Asia. When we talk about West Asia, we are talking about 16 countries listed there for you, and you can see them all here on this map. This region has a long shared history and religious tradition. This region is the birthplace of three major world religions, those religions being Judaism, Christianity, had a problem spelling there, and Islam. And I'm just listing those in order in which they were founded. So specifically, when we're talking about these three major world religions, we're also talking specifically about Israel here in Jerusalem, right? This specific spot here. But there's different areas, particularly Saudi Arabia is important, very important to Islam today. Mecca is in Saudi Arabia. All right, the physical geography of Western Asia. The climate in Western Asia is primarily arid and semi-arid. So again, remember we can substitute in dry for arid. So dry and semi-dry. Although the climate is more temperate along the Mediterranean Sea. Remember when we talked about climate and factors affecting climate, being on a large body of water helps to moderate a climate. So being along the Mediterranean Sea here helps to moderate this otherwise very hot and dry climate. The Arabian Desert dominates this region, covering most of the Arabian Peninsula. So here's our map that shows us the Arabian Desert. Remember, a peninsula is a landmass that's surrounded on 3 sides by water. So this is a large peninsula. Countries on the Arabian Peninsula have the world's largest deposits of oil and natural gas. Oil and natural gas are fossil fuels that are used for energy and fuel around the world. All right, a lot of countries are dependent, including the United States, on oil and natural gas for energy, which means since this country produces all those fossil fuels, or a majority of those fossil fuels, and other countries are so dependent on them and need them, this is one of the most economically important regions in the world. It's one of the reasons the United States is so quick to get involved in things in the Middle East, is because we want to protect our interest in that energy. Right? West Asia is also the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia, or home to what was the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia. The Fertile Crescent was a crescent-shaped region in Western Asia stretching into northern Africa along the Nile River. So here we go, region in Western Africa, forming a crescent, half-moon shape into northern Africa along the Nile River here. At the center of the Fertile Crescent are the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And feel free to zoom in on any of these maps if you would like. So here when I zoom in, it's hard to see zoomed out, but I can see the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and then the smaller rivers even that branch off of it. So for this reason, West Asia is referred to as the cradle of civilization. The unusually fertile land from the floodplains, so from where these rivers would flood, allowed for humans to transition from nomadic hunter-gatherers, and I do believe you talked about this last year. All right, so instead of relying on hunting for all their food and gathering, all right, different plants, and so they would have to move around to follow what they were hunting or to in search of new plants, humans transitioned to a more permanent agricultural society. Right, so this is when people started farming, cultivating, or purposefully growing certain crops. And then once we started farming, we had a more permanent sort of society, and these evolved into the world's first civilizations, like Mesopotamia. Well, what does the Fertile Crescent look like today? The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are still there. They run through modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. However, there are increased demands on the river because of increased population and urbanization, which recall means people moving and building up cities and industry and things like that. And because of the demand on these rivers, the land itself is no longer as fertile as it was, because there's not enough water to kind of flood those lands, make it fertile. Also, multiple dams have been built along the river, leading to less water availability. While it's not the primary cause, the environmental strain is an additional factor causing tensions in this region, right? Including what has been a long and really kind of brutal conflict in Syria. And of course, all of this should sound familiar to you. this idea of having access to less water, or how increased population and urbanization would increase a demand on a water source. So a quick question for you, again, calling on your prior knowledge, what is the term to describe limited availability of water because of a physical lack of water or an inability to meet people's needs? Go ahead and pause this video and take your time to answer this. Your options are water scarcity, water contamination, or irrigation. When we talk about West Asia, a lot of times we think about conflict. It's one of the things that people seem to associate with the Middle East. Over the course of the last century, various conflicts in Middle East have gotten global attention. These conflicts are tied to the history in the region. From ancient history, right, and religious conflicts between people of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all fighting for control of Jerusalem, a holy city to all three religions, to also the Cold War, conflicting belief systems, and like we talked about just recently with Syria, control over resources. Some of these really recent conflicts as of the 20th century are the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's still going on today, the Syrian civil war, and conflict with extremist groups. There are some really amazing cultural spots, however, in West Asia. So we're going to switch gears here. Petra is a historic city in Jordan, this top picture here. It's one of the new 7 wonders of the world. The bottom left here shows us the Dome of the Rock, which is an Islamic shrine on Temple Mount in the old city of Jerusalem. So Temple Mount has historical significance, obviously, for Judaism, as it was the site of the first and second temple. According to the Hebrew Bible, the first temple was built on Temple Mount in 957 BCE by King Solomon. However, when control of the region shifted, this temple was transformed into a Islamic site. Similarly, we see that bottom right with the Hagia Sophia, which is located in Turkey, right, in Istanbul, Turkey, a city that was originally called Constantinople and was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Hagia Sophia was built in 537 AD as a cathedral, but was converted into a mosque, which is an Islamic place of worship, in 1453 when the Ottomans conquered Constantinople. And with that, we will move on to Central Asia. Notice we were here. We are moving now east. All right. Central Asia is sometimes referred to as the stands. There are 5 countries in Central Asia: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, which is formally or officially the Kyrgyz Republic. All 5 of these countries became independent, and this should say 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So these countries were actually all under control of the Soviet Union for some time. This region is referred to as the crossroads of civilization, not the cradle, the crossroads, because of the important role it played in the Silk Road. Remember, the Silk Road were a series of trade routes that connected China to Europe and the Mediterranean Sea over here, and all those trade routes crossed through this area. So we call it the crossroads of civilization. Much of Central Asia is covered by the Eurasian steppe. A steppe is a dry, grassy plain that occurs in a temperate climate zone. The Eurasian steppe is the largest steppe in the world.